Okay, I'm going to do a quick run through of the solution to the Studio 1, FlickList 1. So the first step was to add your API key, which I've done here. I've added mine. So I'm going to skip to the next step, which is here, add a browsing section. So what we're supposed to do here is add another section to our HTML page, similar to the one that's already here, and I'll just show you this. So this is the watch list section where we're going to put the user's watch list. We want, below that, we want another section for browsing so they can add new movies. And we're instructed to put that right here. And it says it can be pretty similar to this one, but should have a different name, a different title, and a different ID. So I'm going to make a section tag. Inside of that, I'm going to do this first. This is the most important thing in here. This is the list where those browsable movies are going to live. And then up here, I'll put a header, inside of which we'll put a large title that says browse movies. And below that, we'll put a little HR, and that what these HR things do, this is just a horizontal line break. It's this horizontal line right here. Cool. So I'm almost done here. Actually, let's see what it looks like now. Yep. So here's our new section right here, and this is where the browsable movies are going to show up. There's one more thing I'm going to add to this, which is an ID. So just like we gave an ID to this section, we're going to also give an ID to our new section. I'm going to call this section browse. These IDs are going to allow us to reference this part of the document later so that we can put stuff inside this list. So we're done with to-do number 1. I actually already accidentally had the word done written here, but normally it would not be here, and then I would say it. And I'm just doing this so that later you guys can look through the code and quickly see the to-dos. It's not like you don't have to add done when you finish them. So let's go on to step number 2. Update the model when the AJAX request succeeds. So we're talking about in here, whenever this discover movies function is called, we're going to make an AJAX request to the movie API, and when when the response comes back, we are asked to update the model so that the browse items property on the model now contains the new movies that just came back from this response. So all we have to do here is, and just as a reminder, the model is sitting right here. It's just a variable with a JavaScript object with 2 arrays, one for the watch list items and one for the browse items. So we want to update the browse items, so all we have to do is reassign the browse items to be response. And remember, response was an object passed into our function, and this is the data that came back from the API in the form of a big JavaScript object, which contains a bunch of things, among which is our movies. And the movies specifically are going to be in a key called results. The reason we know it's in this results key is simply because if we inspect our page and look at the console in this print statement, which came from here, First we log this, and then we log the response itself, resulting in this line here. If we actually look at this object, we see these are the properties it has. It has something called a page, something called results, something called total pages, and results is an array of these objects, and these objects are the movies. These are our movies. So that's how we knew that the thing we care about here is this results thing. The reason it's called results is simply because that's what the API chose to call it in this case. So all we have to do is say, hey, I want the browse items now to be equal to the results of this response. That's all there is to it. And I'm actually going to, so I think we're done. I think we've done this, but let's just make sure. Let's do something like, as soon as we do this, console.log model. I'm just going to log the model. And I'll put another thing so we know where we are. Here is the model. I just want to make sure that the data actually got added. So here it is. It says here's the model, and then we printed out the model, and it says watch list items is an array with 0 things in it. Browse items is an array with 20 things in it. So that sounds very promising. Let's just make sure. Here it is. Browse items, 20 things. Great. Our movies are now inside of our model, which is great because that means, mark this done, that means now when this render function is called, we're going to be able to actually, we're going to have some data that we can reference to actually display on the screen. I'm going to go back to the assignment page and check the next step. So we did this. And our next job, in fact, is to get started on that render function. So step number 1, or in the render function, which is 3 overall, is to insert a list item for each of these movies in the browse list. So these ones that we just added, we added them to the model, and now we want them to show up here on the screen. So what we're going to do is, here it is, to do 3. So we're actually going to work on this stuff first and then come back and do this stuff later. So there's a little starter code for us already, which simply iterates over each of the items in the browse items array. So we're saying for each thing inside of this array, run this function. This function takes an argument, which is going to call movie, because each of those things is in fact an object representing a movie. So we're going to run this function 20 times. And each time we run it, we're going to get a movie. And then for that movie, we're going to add an element to the DOM. So that's what we're going to do here in step 3. So to do that, we're going to use jQuery, which is a JavaScript library. Anytime you see this $, you know that jQuery is probably involved. We're going to call this $sign function and pass into it a string. So I should say first what we're trying to do here. What we're doing is creating a new element. We're going to create a list item element. And to do that, we just pass some HTML as a string. This creates a new list item. And I'll say something like var, I'll make a new variable out of it, var item view equals this. Now we have a reference to a list item. And in fact, what I'm going to do, instead of just creating an empty list item, I'm going to put some text inside of it. To do that, we'll call another jQuery function called text. And we simply pass the text that we want to place inside. So what this does is simply puts this text inside of here. So it will result in HTML that looks like this: li, hello. So the hello is what gets displayed on the screen. So now we have this list item element, and all we want to do is add it to this thing. So we'll use another jQuery, couple jQuery functions. This first thing we're going to do is we're going to query the DOM, which means we're going to find this list item, this unordered list, and obtain a reference to it so that we can insert things into it. So to do that, I'm going to use, we don't directly have a way of getting this, but we indirectly can get it via this section, which has an ID that we can hook into. So I'll use this hash symbol, section, browse. This means give me the element whose ID is section browse, space UL. And what this space UL does is says, give me all of the unordered lists inside of this other element. And in fact, of course, we only have one such list, but in other cases, we might want to do operations on multiple elements at the same time. But in our case, it's only one, and that also works fine. So this gives us, we now have that UL. And what we can do is call this other function append, which simply adds a child element to a parent element, to a container. So we're just going to append the item view into the list. And that's it. Let's see if this worked. Great, it worked. So for each move that came back, we called that function and we added a hello list item to the list. I'm going to just look at our markdown here. Yeah, here's the list, and here's each of the items, and it says hello. So we're getting closer. Instead of hello, though, we don't want to say hello, we want to say the title of the movie. So remember, for each of these movies, we're calling this function, and we have a reference to that movie, and it's simply called, this variable name is simply movie, because we specified that we wanted to call it movie. And we're going to try and grab that movie's title, and I happen to remember that the API uses this original title as the property to grab the title from a movie object. So now we should see, if we refresh the page again, we should see the actual names of the movies. Let's see if that worked, and it did. Great. Okay, there's one last thing we need to do to finish this task, and that is, so notice that our HTML looks like this. It's a UL with list items, and then the text is directly inside the list item. The studio asks us to do something a little more complicated, which is, instead of just having the raw text inside of the list item, it should be wrapped first inside of a paragraph tag. So to do that, we simply need to make a smaller element and then, put it inside. So I'm going to make a paragraph just like before. I'm going to set its text equal to movie.original title, and then instead of adding the text to the list item. Oops, I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to just call it title. So title is the variable name for this paragraph. And then I'm just going to append, again, I'm going to use this append function to put the title inside of the list item. And then we're going to put the list item inside of the list. Let's run it again. Yeah, and this looks a little different now because paragraphs add a bit of a line break and margin and such. And if we inspect our markdown, we should now see, yep, paragraph with the text inside of it. So now we are truly done with step 3. Step 4 says the list item should include a button that says add to watch list. So this one's actually pretty easy. I'm just going to make another element, button, and give it a text property of add to watch list. And I'm going to move this I'm going to move both these things down here, and at this point in my list item I wanted to have that paragraph title. I also wanted to have this button. And to do that, I can simply, so I could do something like this: item view dot append oops, I forgot to give this a name just like last time. Button. Okay, so button is a variable representing this button. So I want to append that to the item view, and I could say item view.append button. So now the item view has the title and it also has the button, and then we're putting it inside the list, and this should work. Great. So now these buttons are here. I'm going to show you an alternate cool syntax for doing this all in one line. I can just sort of chain these method calls in one line. The reason this works, and I'll show you that it works. The reason this works is because any jQuery function, like for example append, does two things. One, it causes the side effect to occur of appending this thing to the inside of the list item. So it's going to do that action for us. It's also going to return the original element on which we called the method. So all that is a fancy way of saying when I do this, it not only appends the title into the list item, it also returns to me the list item. So this expression right here, this results in the list item itself. So now I still have a reference to the list item, and I can do anything that I normally would do to it. So I can call another jQuery function on it yet again, and this is going to append the button to the list item. So I can take this whole expression and then call another method on it as if I was just dealing with this. So now we are done with step 4. Mark that as done. Next thing to do, when the button is clicked, this movie should be added to the watch list. Render should be called again. So notice that we have these buttons here, but nothing actually happens when I click that. So what should happen is when we click this, the same movie should show up in this watch list. So let's make that happen. So to do that, what we want to do is add another jQuery property on this button, and we can use this. I'm going to use this fancy chaining thing again. So this is the button, so I can simply say dot something else, and what I'm going to say is click, dot click. What dot click does is the click function lets you attach a sort of event handler to an element that will fire every time that element is clicked. So every time this button is clicked, we are going to, or jQuery is going to cause, if I can spell it, function. Every time this button is clicked, this function that we pass in right here is going to execute. And so we can put in here anything we want, thereby specifying the actions that we want to take in response to the button being clicked. And in our case, what we want to do is add the movie to the model's watch list and then call render again. So add it to the watch list is as simple as saying, and we're talking about this model, this watch list. I'm going to say model.watchlistItems.push. Push simply adds things onto the end of an array. I'm going to push a new movie. And I still have a reference to this movie that was passed into the for each loop on the browse item. So we're still talking about for each thing in the browse item, we've got a movie, and we're going to make a button that when it's clicked pushes that movie onto the end of this array. I'm going to do this. That's step one. And then I'm going to call render again. So now that the model has changed, anytime the model changes, we want to just simply re-display the view to reflect the new model. So this is step 5. I'm going to almost call that done. Let's do a log statement do something like this. Every time it's clicked, I'm just going to log the word click and log the new model so we can verify to ourselves that this is working properly. We'll go to the console over here and clear it. Great. So that it definitely happened, and then yeah, notice that watch list item now contains one thing. And that one thing is Star Wars. I assume that's what I clicked on, I can't remember. Let's do Jurassic World and make sure that that is the thing in here. Jurassic World, great. So it seems to be working correctly. Now notice we called render again, so theoretically everything should be re-displaying. You might notice, you might be confused that why aren't they showing up in the watch list yet? And that's simply because we haven't actually done that step yet. So that's the next thing to do, but for now I think it's safe to say that we succeeded in completing step 5. So let's go ahead and do step 6 now. So step 6 says for each movie on the watch list, we want it to actually show up right here, or right here. And the way we can do this is pretty similar to what we did here, although less complicated because we don't need another button at this point. I'm going to say, I'm going to loop over all of the watch list items. Watch list items dot for each, and these are movies as well. I'm just going to call each little item a movie. For each movie, I'm going to pretty much do this. So I'm going to say item view equals list item. I'll skip that paragraph for now, we can do that later. Item view is a list item with the text, raw text with the movie's title in it. And I'm going to append that to section watch list UL. Append. Oops. Item view. So now I should see, yep, Captain America shows up. Batman shows up. And you might notice, hey, why are there two Captain Americas? So that's actually a bug that we're going to fix in step 7. But for now, I think we're all set, and our code is working as we expect. We've got, every time we click a button, the new movie is showing up. And that's all we need to care about for step 6, so I think this is done. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do is fix this bug. So we obviously don't want all these repeated movies to show up. The reason that's happening is because each call to render is simply appending stuff to the list, but we're never removing stuff. And we're appending every single movie in the model. So even though Captain America, I'll refresh it. So Captain America's in the list, and then when we go to add Batman, it's going to add Captain America and Batman on top of this one, which is already here, without removing this one. So all we need to do is, before we go, next time I click render, what I want to do is clear everything and then go ahead and add all the stuff. So all we need to do is add some code here as the first thing we do inside render is clear this list. And actually this one as well. Notice how long this list has gotten. It's only 20 things, but it actually keeps repeating itself. So notice Captain America, blah, 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 blah. Here's Captain America again. So it's the same problem. Every time we re-render, we're appending 20 more things to this list, even though they're already in the list. So what we're going to do is just clear, empty this thing out, and then do the rest of the appending. To do this, we're just going to use a jQuery function called empty. Doesn't need any arguments. What it does is just clears all of the children from whatever element you give it. The element we're going to give it is this same list. Section watch list UL. Then we'll do the same thing for the other one. Section browse UL.empty. And now, great. Now our list looks normal, and this other list looks normal. Ant-Man's the last movie, no matter how many times we click things. So, that concludes step 7. And that concludes the studio. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have questions, and I'll see you in class.